I'm going to be super controversial right now. And what I'm about to say is your dream doesn't have to look like that. But we're told that that's what it's supposed to look like. A house is not necessarily a good investment. Your personal residence is not a sound investment avenue. Most of us think it is, but the truth of the matter is, so take our home, for example. We bought our house 5 years ago, $325,000, little 1,200 square foot home. By the time we pay it off, we'll pay over $600,000 with interest. We're paying almost double if we were to extend out and pay the 30-year mortgage. That's not an investment. Now, we love our home. I wouldn't trade it for a second. Our home is where our babies grew up. It's where they took their first steps. I love our home. But it's not just that compound, or it's not just that interest. It's not compound interest. It's not that interest that we're paying. It's also because our house was built in the 60s. You alluded to the old home. Our house was built in the 60s. Cast iron piping. We just replaced 13 feet of cast iron piping underneath our home last year after I left my full-time job. I left my full-time job in February of 2023. And I talked to my clients, and this is exactly why I make sure my clients start setting up an emergency fund. I left my 15-year career. I was net taking home almost $6,000 a month. And I left it because I love what I do as a financial coach, and I want to help more people become successful with their money. What happened a month later, after we had just gotten used to the fact that we were now living on one income? We had to replace 13 feet of piping underneath our home. Our back fence blew down because a storm came through, and so now we were looking out our backyard into our neighbor's backyard. My husband needed new tires on his car. And there was one more thing that happened. I can't think of it. But literally we have 4 things happen within the span of 3 weeks that depleted our emergency fund. But we had an emergency fund. It was there and it did its purpose. And then once we got through it, so it took a stressful situation. So to most people, that would be the most stressful period to go through. When you know you are short, you're down one income, and you have all of these things happen at once. But because we had a plan ahead of time, we knew eventually at some point we were going to have some type of thing go on. But that's the thing with home ownership, right? Is you have to pay for all these things. There's no landlord that's going to come in and fix the fence or repair the piping. It's all on you, unless you have a home warranty. But our home warranty was crap because our house was so old. So, but my point being is we have to start really thinking about what we want as individuals or as couples, as a family. What do we want out of life? What do we want it to look like? Not what it should look like. Not what everybody else tells us it should look like, but what do we want?
That statement you made about the home and what you bought it for and what you're going to pay in, I think is going to floor a lot of people when they look at the numbers, because that's probably the same almost everywhere in the country. You buy a home for this much, and what do most people think? They look at the equity. If I buy it today, in 20 years, if I buy it today for $500,000, in 20 years, it should be at least $800,000. So I'm going to make $300,000 on the home. Therefore, it's a good investment. But that's what people see. But then the other side of it, they know deep down there's going to be home maintenance. There's insurance. There's always something that's going to go wrong with the house. But because you can't see it, you can't quantify what that number is going to look like. So how did you come up with the number of, you bought it at $350,000, correct? Or 325?
325, yeah.
And how did you come up with 600,000? How did you plan for this much in expenses that are going to end up saying, hey, by the time we leave this home, this is how much we're going to spend?
Well, we didn't plan for it. We just looked at our amortization schedule that they give you with your mortgage. And at the time when we weren't paying attention to that. When we got our house, we bought a house really that we probably, there were things that came up after we bought the house that cost us money within months. Within the first year, we were forking over cash to repair things in our home. And so, but we weren't really doing much with our finance at that point. We were just doing, I think what most people do is we're supposed to buy a house, you get married. I was pregnant at the time, we need a home we're not going to be renting forever. And that was just our mindset.
And this is what, early 30s?
Yeah, we were mid-30s. Yeah. So my husband and I got married. I think I was 33 and he was 35.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, but we were just doing what everybody said we should be doing. We probably wouldn't have changed it, but we didn't look at the numbers then. I didn't look at those numbers until we started really getting deep into our finances. It's like, oh, okay, well, what does that look like? But, because the more I read and listen to podcasts and things like that, they're talking about how your personal residence is not an investment. It's not an investment. And I'm like, well, what does that even mean? And then sure enough, I look and I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense because we basically pay for double of what the original price tag was. Now, if you factor in, how much real estate has grown, especially here in California, might our home I don't know that our home's going to get up to a 600,000 figure, within the next 20 years. It might, I don't know, but I'm not counting on it. I'm going to put other provisions in place because even if our house does, get to the point where it's worth $600,000, we're still living in it. Mm-hmm. We don't get that money till we sell it. And where are you going to go when you sell it? To a bigger home? Yeah. Smaller home? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to downsize or
move out of state or something?
Yeah, exactly. And so, there is some potential there here in California, but the truth of the matter is the way that the prices for housing is right now, it's not realistic, unfortunately. You have to start early saving. Like I'm talking, if you are like early 20s, is start saving for that first home at that point. Because, now our home, I think it's over 400,000, I think is what it's worth now. But like, let's say if we were to go buy our home right now, yes, you can get zero down. I wouldn't recommend that. That's what we did, but I would never recommend anybody to go zero down on a home. Like put a down payment on your home, but usually that's going to be 20%. So that's for our home. So 10% would be 40 grand.
65,000 you need almost.
Yeah. So like that's a lot. That's a good chunk of change, right? It's going to take you at least 10 years to save that up probably, unless you really pinch some pennies.
I mean, imagine Silicon Valley County, Santa Clara, San Francisco, San Mateo. Right. You're talking about $1 million plus. So you need at least 200,000 in the bank. And how many of us have that ready to go saying, I'm ready to go buy that home. And then if you do have the 200 grand, then wait, what's the best thing I could do with this money so I can plan for long-term thing? And then is buying a home the best thing? Period A, and then B, especially if you don't want kids, it's like, well, then why do you need that home? You could put that money somewhere else into a different investment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this whole home thing, and I get why people say it because it just, at the very least, it makes you feel like, okay, I own this house. Therefore, because I own it, I made something, I made something on myself. I'm going to be okay. They can never take it away from me. Well, if I don't pay the mortgage, they can, but once I own it, they can't take it away from me, and I'll always have that in the back. So I think that sense of security that people really hold on to, saying this is why I need to buy a house, and that if you're renting, you're throwing money away, because that's the mindset. Even though the numbers don't really pan out that way, especially around here, like some of the more wealthier people probably rent their home here and they own something in a different state, and that's how they're making their money. We can keep going on about the home thing because it's one of the biggest, I'm gonna say lies, but the biggest misconception is that you need to own your home in order to be wealthy and to be well off, when really that is not the case. Sometimes it's going to be a lot better for people to rent, especially when you're living in a high cost of living area like San Francisco, where everything is just ridiculously overpriced because that's the nature of the market. This is where all the jobs came from. Well, they're leaving now, but this is where a lot of the jobs came from for a long time with tech.